not answer that question. Okay, now we are definitely recording, and welcome to Thoughts on Talks. We just did a really great show that wasn't recording.
You missed it.
But see, isn't that a theme? Because the Sunday Talk didn't record either for some reason.
Wow.
So what is the message? We're
Pay your internet bill?
No. The internet bill is paid. It's about something else, which we will try to discover. So today's Thoughts on Talks is on the topic of yesterday's Sunday Talk at CSL Granada Hills, which is the way it works. Did you want to give a theme song to that?
No.
Okay.
Unless you want me to.
I do.
Scattered pictures like the shadows of my mind.
Wow, this is better than the first time.
The way it works.
That is something you wouldn't have gotten if you were here live Sunday.
Well, you know.
I mean, yesterday you didn't do that. So it's
if
only
I don't
today.
sleep the night before, you might get a piece of it.
That'll keep him coming back, just waiting for the moment.
Yeah.
That and the Elvis kick.
Yeah, I want some more of that.
Well, what I like about it is that you're a person, not a role. You haven't, I mean, you've stepped into the role of ministry, spiritual director, speaker, leader, all of that. And you show your personality, which shows you as a regular person, not just this elevated being, not just
I'm a spiritual hayseed.
So the way it works, the topic, we're going back. So the purpose of this talk, usually, our little Thoughts on Talks, is to do deep dives and digressions from the Sunday Talk and sort of examine and play with the ideas. But since the Sunday Talk didn't record yesterday,
we can say whatever the hell we want.
Yeah. And if you weren't there live, you won't know any different. If you were there live, you're going to go, I don't remember that part.
Well, maybe we can just pick out, go through it. There's only 10 pages, so
well,
we can pick out one thing on each page.
Okay. I have notes on one.
And then you can digress.
Okay.
We'll see what you have to say.
Oh, I've got digressions. But first, I want to show our little logo again. So I'll do screen share, and there's our official logo, and I say share. And there it is. And in the background, you might be able to see, I don't know, can they see that? I'll show you later. If you can't see it now, you'll see it later. So you're just smiling there like a cat that ate the canary, because you know the way it works. That's why you're smiling.
Yes.
And the it in the way it works, capitalized.
Yes, IT.
Mm-hmm. Not lowercase.
Not ID. It's
and
not
too uppercase IT, which is information technology.
Yeah.
Or lowercase.
Let's not go there today.
Which is that'll be an English lesson if it's all lowercase. But the capitalized I, lowercase t.
Yes.
The way it works, and it is the power of God itself, according to the notes of your Sunday Talk.
Yes. Well, that's my understanding of it for sure. And I encourage everyone, whatever it is that I say, my main job is I'm the, what's his name? I'm the Roger Stone of religious science. I'm a provocateur. I'm just here to provoke you into thinking deeper on spiritual matters, whether you agree with me or because it's totally okay if you disagree.
Oh, that's good to know.
So long as you don't give up on it.
Yeah.
Right? So you say, it's bench jive, and then you don't go anywhere, or you stop thinking about it altogether because it's too hard. Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm spiritual but not religious, so let me just roll over and go back to sleep. Right? No, we're not doing that.
We want to connect to the divine and experience living from that place.
Right. And if you're watching this, then that's what you want too. Even if I'm not your cup of tea. And that's okay, because Malayna's here and she can be your cup of tea.
Happy to be.
But you understand what I'm saying. What I really want people to do.
You're not telling people what to believe. I'm
offering, through Ernest Holmes, he put it together the way I like it. I love the idea that of this idea of God, as being so much greater than what I think it is, that it's, the infinite power and infinite presence is a lot. And I also like knowing that I'm the individualized expression of this power and presence, right? Which we use the word it because it's non-gender. That's why I use it.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I could take like she and he and it and combine them all together, but that wouldn't be a very nice word.
No, it sounds pretty, and that's, I think, a lot of the evidence just why the word God has become so loaded and so confusing, because there are so many concepts and so many different points of view that are converged in this idea that we've been using this word for such a long time.
Right.
Kind of like church. It's easier to say I'm going to church than I'm going to my spiritual center on Sunday, because sometimes people don't get what that is. Are you doing yoga? Are you doing some kind of rituals? If we say church, they know what that means.
We did think about calling it a temple, but that has its own connotations,
yeah.
Right. So if you come from Judaism, it may be a synagogue or a little shtetl, as they say, or if you come from from a Hindu background, you would think or a Buddhist background, you might think it's something else. So, and then you'd be really shocked to see a pale face with a suit on up in front. So
it would be a different expectation. So
right.
Like with God, if we're used to saying or seeing in the Bible, capital H-E, right, a male figure, and who's addressed as a father by Jesus. And so we often picture this, it's probably much like Zeus handed down from Greeks, this kind of giant, wise, older fella in the sky, sometimes thought of as like a Santa Claus god. And when we're shifting to it, the way it works, I like the power of God itself, because then we're focusing on the power. And then we can deal with our, the pictures in our head and our concepts after that. But the power is where we want to focus, to connect to that.
Well, that's
divine power.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So I never thought about, for instance, Holmes' little tagline that we attribute to him, that there's a power for good in the universe, available to everyone, and we can use it. So in 12-step, of course, the concept of a higher power that we can use, that's like a basic strategy for whatever addictive behavior you're working with, because there's a 12-step program for everything now. But so that's where I first was exposed to this idea. But it wasn't until I came, because, in a way it's easier. Like if you're just, you're putting a plug in the jug, or you're, walking away from cigarettes, there's a substance that you're walking away from. That's one thing. And you have an obvious demonstration of that, right? And if you're with a group of people who are practicing doing that, then you can see how this higher power works in that way. It's a little trickier, because now we're getting down to the more subtle aspects, which is what they do in Al-Anon, really, if you think about it, right? So we're dealing with the subtle aspects of thought and behaviors.
Right. So to me, it becomes, especially if you're talking about, maybe it's people who are connecting to spirituality for the first time when they've come to a 12-step program, and it makes it a holistic process, that they know they can't do it just with their own mind and willpower, and that their body may feel like it's working against them. But when they can add the spiritual aspect and do mind, body, spirit all at once, and then it takes them on that journey in a more, whole way.
And of course, the key to that is admitting that we're powerless over the substance that we're working on, which religious scientists don't like acknowledging that we're powerless over anything because we have the infinite power and presence of the divine within us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And yet, where the chink in the armor is,
Mm-hmm.
right, we are not demonstrating as effectively as we would like.
Okay.
And that's where, at least for me, it's good to know that this power and presence is available to me, right? So it's kind of like a variable speed drill. Have you ever used a variable speed drill?
No.
Or a sawzall?
No.
All
I'm
right.
scared
So,
I'd hurt myself.
so in the old days, you just had on off for a
Mm-hmm.
drill.
Mm-hmm.
But today they have what's called a variable speed so that you can apply more power as the tool gets to working better.
Is it like a stick shift driving a car? Changing
Yes,
gears?
but there's no clutch. It just zzz.
Okay.
Yeah, so good one. So it's like an automatic transmission.
Okay.
Yeah.
That does it for you when you
Right.
need to.
And so we can, we have this power available to us in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the variable speed, it doesn't have to be variable speed except for
how we can understand it
Right.
and practice using it and opening up to it and
or think we have to deserve it, right? So
mm-hmm.
I mean, we really need to become willing to step away from the old thought patterns that have got us to the place where we currently are. So, if I constantly find myself working to get out of debt, right? So I create debt, I get out of debt, and then I create something that gets me back into debt. Let's say a traffic ticket that you thought paid off comes out of nowhere, and they want to not only have the bail amount, but a $300 court fee on top of it, right? So you have the consciousness to create the money in the first place, and then there's something in our thinking then that creates a need for more money because we have not developed a consciousness of being able to hang on to that which we create. Right? So let's say that's a pattern, particularly say where the government is involved.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if I have a subtle belief that believes that the government is out to get me and that they've always got their hand in my pocket. So I don't know anyone who would actually make that affirmation except myself. but inevitably.
That's why it's a good example, because
yes,
you're sharing from your own experience.
I'm sharing from my own heart because I am dealing with this right now. And so we create a way to where it appears that the state is, got their hand in my pocket yet again. So, so I'm now willing to know that the spirit is not bound by precedent, that there is an infinite power and presence at work to help guide and guard me through any of the challenges of my life experience, but particularly in this place. So what's going to happen is I will get my little pieces of paper together and I will go over to the courthouse and I will do a spiritual mind treatment in my car before I go in there. And I'll just know that the clerk is there to be of service to me and will find ways and avenues to help me through this situation where I can just pay what I owe and leave the rest. For some poor other slob to deal with. I know for it to just, dissolve from the ethers from which it came.
I like it. I support you in that vision.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So one of the things when you were, describing this on Sunday that came to my mind as an explanation that really helped me, thinking about the power of God sort of behind and infused through everything, and me being aware of it, was a scene from a movie, of course, because that's how my brain works, called I Heart Huckabees. and it's called I Heart Huckabees because it has the red heart in the middle, and it is a just
Like
funny, weird movie.
The Huckabee?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's Huckabee's, a department store.
Oh, all right.
And
not that there's anything wrong with it.
okay, I'm skipping right by, keeping going. So it's Dustin Hoffman, Lily Tomlin, and a young man has come to a metaphysical detective agency because he's having bizarre issues that don't seem real to anybody else, but he wants these metaphysical detectives to investigate for him. And the first thing Dustin Hoffman does, because Dustin Hoffman...
And they are the Huckabees, the metaphysical detectives?
No, Huckabees is the department store that this young man works for, whose name has escaped me. I think it's Jason, but I can't remember his last name.
Okay.
I have a clip ready that I can share. You ready?
Oh.
Let's see how this works.
Technology.
It's just like a minute, so it won't take that long. So there's Dustin Hoffman. Let me do full screen. I got the closed captions on, but they might not be very good because it's by a robot. So let's see how this goes. I can't hear it.
Oh, I know that guy.
Jason. But you know what? I don't know why the sound isn't working. Is it because we're...
Jason Magnificent Hair?
Okay. Well, okay. We can't hear him, but he's...
It's everything okay. Let's sake this out right now.
Okay, I'm wearing a gray suit. No, that's not what he's saying at all.
Let's
all right, this is failing me. So he's holding a blanket.
Do you think that's a wig?
Maybe. Maybe because the characters are just very cartoony. So I was going to look up Jason's name, but that's not the point. The point is this, that he has a blanket, and he says everything is in this blanket. This blanket is all the matter and energy in the universe, every particle, everything. And he says, so over here is the Eiffel Tower, and over here is a hamburger, and over here is me, and over here is you. And so the young man says, okay, I get it. So everything's the same, even if it's different. And he said, yes, we think everything is separate, which is kind of true, but it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that we're all connected. And so he tells the guy, I'm going to go out of this screen because it's not helpful. He tells the guy that once you get the blanket truth, which is, the example of his blanket, you can relax because everything you could ever want or be, you already have and are. And I just thought, wow, he did a good job putting that all together.
I wonder if that's on Netflix.
It is, I bet. I Heart Huckabees, and you can spell out heart.
Yes.
But, it's like one of those stickers with the eye and the red heart. And Huckabees is the department store that he, I think, got fired from. And, he's blaming his issues on the cool owner guy of the Huckabees department store, who's Jude Law.
Oh, I wonder if this young man who was an actor in the scene there with Dustin Hoffman, if that changed his life after knowing that, or if it was just a line.
He has a really interesting career, so I'm going to guess he knows more than most people. He seems to choose strange and interesting movies and do pretty well. So the next part that you went into after saying that God is more than we think it is, and that we have to just open our mind that it's bigger than we can imagine. You talked about rituals. Yeah. And the importance of them.
Didn't really have anything to do with anything after the day was done, did it?
Well, let's see. Oh, you were talking about the flames of faith.
Yes.
And the importance, why you chose to do it, why this center chooses to do it.
Yeah, it's important to me.
And that it honors that everybody finds a different path to that light.
Right.
And that we welcome that and honor anybody coming from any religious background to come and share.
Yeah, well, and then the caveat to that, of course, is it's one thing to do it in here, where this is our place,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing to do it out there, because this is one of the things that came up in one of the interfaith things that we did, that there are definite strong differences, right? So for instance, if you're a rabbi versus, I don't think there were any evangelicals, but there were many Christians and Catholics there. There's going to be, strong differences as to what that means, but that doesn't mean that we can't still come together in mutual respect and loving kindness and equanimity to address the human condition where so many of us fall through the cracks.
And it feels like it's a more open way of looking at the world in general. If you're willing to be part of an interfaith organization, that means that you're not in black and white thinking that I'm right, you're wrong, or this path is right and the others lead only one place, which is bad. That you're open to saying, well, all of these paths have value.
It does have some theologic, conundrums within it. But if we start with the premise, and this is what Holmes was kind of doing and others, right? That regardless of what you call it, so I come out of Catholicism, so, the Holy Spirit is what Jesus would call it, at least in English, modern English. So why can't that Holy Spirit be present in all religious thought and experience? To me, it just is illogical to think that it can't be, because then God would be limited.
Yeah.
And, I guess the other part of this is that I feel like, I'm a Catholic because I was raised in a Catholic family.
Right.
And I mean, there's no way that you can know these things, of course, but, I did have relatives who were in the English Army, who did serve in India, right? So I very well could have been born in India.
But if your family was still Catholic, you would have been raised Catholic, but with maybe a culture that was different outside. So you might have been given more of a choice than somebody whose family and whose culture.
Right. Well, so for instance, one of my, there is a branch in the family where they did marry someone who was Indian, whose mother was Indian, right? So one of my relatives on that side was a sergeant in the British Army who married an Indian woman.
Okay.
So, I mean, how could your children not be influenced, right? Particularly if you were born and raised there.
Right.
So, yeah, you might be on an English compound or military base, whatever they called them. Anyway, here's one of those digressions.
Well, I have that kind of upbringing, though, that my father is
that's right, huh?
Sri Lankan Muslim, and my mother is a blue-eyed blonde American who was raised in Unity, which is a New Thought path as well. And when they were talking about getting married, the idea that New Thought doesn't see Jesus as the one and only path or one and only way to get to God, but as a way shower, great example, not a great exception. So that's something that Islam, because they see him as a prophet among many prophets, they were able to agree on that. And so they were married in a unity church. And I grew up with the awareness that there are different ways of looking at and interpreting spirit moving through our lives and through our families.
Yeah, firsthand.
Yeah. And, I was raised in America, and my mom was the one who took me to the church she grew up in. So I grew up in New Thought, not in Islam. I just knew about it, but my dad is not the type of person who, would teach anything about it on a regular basis. It was more like the choices he made and the quotes he gave or something are how I know anything about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But he's sort of a creative person. So that's, it comes out through his, in creative ways, not through kind of stable teaching one at a time ways. But it did give me the concept that there isn't just one way that everybody I know follows,
Right.
So back to the way it works. I'm looking through the notes, relative truth versus absolute truth, and the example of magnetic north versus true north.
Yeah, I don't know where that
I had
came from.
Well, I liked it. Let's see if I can go back in the notes to see where it came from. Using, that in courts, interestingly enough, if we swear to tell the whole truth and we place no value on the truth, then how can we use it as a guiding principle? And then you said truth is like following a wandering star.
It can be, yeah.
Yeah.
Or we want to make sure that we aren't following a wandering star.
Right.
Yeah.
I should read the whole sentence you wrote and not just some of the words.
Right. So, and of course, the point I made was that in ancient times, a wandering star is what we know today as a planet.
Because it moves, it changes location in the sky.
Correct.
Okay.
And so true north was something that you could navigate by, which is, I think, the tail end of the Little Dipper, if I remember right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you talked about a compass to try to find where true north is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also have to know about magnetic north, which is relative.
Mm-hmm. To true north.
Mm-hmm. So relative truth versus absolute truth. It's a good right. example.
So you can use relative truth to get you to absolute truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and at the level of the relative, it appears to be true until we understand that, this condition in my life is not what's causing my pain and suffering. What's causing my pain and suffering is my attachment to it.
Right.
And so then what I do then is I recenter, and by whatever method of prayer. So in our teaching, we use affirmative prayer, or what we call a mental treatment or spiritual mind treatment, which really the work in that is understanding and knowing our oneness with the divine, which is easy when everything's going our way.
Right.
It's when we're in the soup when it's the most challenging.
And that's the difference of going from the relative idea to the blanket truth, like in I Heart Huckabees, in the not very useful clip I tried to share. But you should go look it up.
People may go look it up. I'm going to.
I Heart Huckabees blanket is all you have to search on YouTube.
Because I do have a Seahawk blanket that I brought into the
so then everything is one with the Seahawks.
Well, not anymore.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
so close, but yet so far.
And still, the power of God is present.
Yes.
Even when it didn't go the way you had hoped. Those are the lessons that are hardest.
You know what's the toughest part about being a Seahawk fan is?
No.
You have to just forget constantly about the first quarter the first half, because most of the time they don't play until the second half of the game.
Really? They wake up or something?
I don't think I've even bothered to watch the first half of a Seahawk game in years.
Oh, well, that gives you time to get snacks and say hi to your friends.
I don't really have time to watch for all my chit chat and yakking about football. I don't really have time to sit down and watch a whole game anymore.
Okay.
But in the case of
Seattle, you don't have to.
Right? All you're going to do is be aggravated for the first half. So why bother?
And
Why
isn't
not?
that a lot like life? No, I don't know. I
So
don't know
don't
if it
even
exactly
bother with
is.
the first half of your life. Just live the
Just
last
accept
half.
that it might be very different than the second half of your
Just get
life.
your cosmic shovel and just start digging. No, cancel that.
Cancel
That's
that
not good
out.
advice.
No.
In fact, if you take the things that we're talking about here today and the other times that we speak to this, if you are a younger person, right, and understand that it's not by chance that your life is evolving, but that you can bring the power of consciousness to bear into every area of your life. So if you are a student and feeling a little lost, right, that you can know that the first order of business, just like in life, is to suit up and show up, right? And then as you remember that, oh yeah, there's a higher power at work here, right? So I just do what's mine to do,
right,
which is to get through this class, right? Get the credit for this class, and then
look for the electives maybe that you can take that really support a passion that you have or sound interesting, exciting, something like that.
Something that's going to keep you in the game. But particularly going to college, right? It's a good precursor to life, because there's a lot of parts about going to college that are just about turning the crank and getting them done so you can do the stuff you want to do. And boy, there's a lot of life that can go that way also. It's just about doing what's yours to do, and then, but also consciously engaging with the infinite intelligence that the spirit is, to know that we are being guided and directed to our heart's desire, right?
And part of that work is figuring out what our heart desire
is.
Yeah.
Right.
By listening to our
listening
inner
to
voice.
And if you come to places like this, and go to a class or two, you're going to end up doing that kind of work. Now you have a class coming up on Thursday, right?
Yeah.
So I imagine you have some section in there that's dedicated to pondering.
Yep.
And because, sometimes we uncover, discover, and discard the things that no longer serve us. But what's even, most of us know what we don't want.
Yeah.
Right. But the trick to this gig is figuring out what it is that we do want, and then identifying the patterns, the thought patterns, the habit patterns that are standing in the way of that. And often what it means is that we have to really, again, expand our thinking to see a new way.
Yeah. I keep thinking of it as like taking blinders off.
Yeah.
That a lot of growing up and being socialized into behaving like a good citizen in society is following rules and behaving a certain way and doing this and, don't get in trouble, stay in line, all of that. And that has its value. And it's about social agreement. So we all know how things are supposed to work. And then there's figuring out what works for us within that system. And sometimes we have to step outside of that system to find what truly works for us, makes our heart sing, and makes us feel like we're stepping fully into expressing the divinity within us. And that can be a lifelong journey.
Well, yeah. And then, so just taking it back to this metaphor of relative north versus true north, right? So if you're in a lower latitude in the journey and you're off by a degree or two, you're going to be off by hundreds of miles by the time you get to where you're going, right? And so, and even when using a compass and following this idea of true north, you're constantly checking your course to make sure you are on course.
Right.
And
And you might need to make a course correction.
Right. And spiritual practice is essential. Whoops. It's essential that way because it helps to keep us in the flow of life, which is where we want to be. Because the thing about this idea, again, of the metaphor of true north, so how do you know if you're on the right path? Is, well, you can tell because it feels right, right? And the flow, you're not working against the flow of things, right? So that doesn't mean that you don't still hit obstacles and hiccups and bumps. But I don't know, the way is made clear. And so it doesn't mean, anything worth doing is going to have some difficulty and challenge in it. Right. Because we're going to be working our edge anyway, hopefully.
Yeah.
So.
And it's something to keep in mind as we're working toward goals is there is work involved. Like we have to engage, we have to step in and participate in the process, that it's not about sitting back and waiting for the flow to happen for us. This journey is happening through us as us. So we got to step into it and
and it does happen, but it also does, I think, happen to us in that we are attracting to us things, right? So, and in that way, so the way it works then is that we're not being subjected to the slings and arrows of fate and fortune anymore.
Right.
But instead, we are consciously working with through our alignment with the divine, knowing that it's there, being receptive to the good that is already ours, right? Then we are guided into the ways of taking action that we then step into that greater yet to be.
Right.
And that's, to me, that is a constant process. And if it's not, then we don't have a big enough thing that we're looking towards.
Right.
So so many of us, when we're younger, we think, well, I'm going to work and then I'm going to retire. And then when I retire, I'm going to, be able to kick back. And one of the great things about being in spiritual community is, I see people, I have several people now that I have watched for the last 10 or 15 years of their working life. And now they're retired and they're now way busier. They are way busier pursuing these interests and have really grown this gigantic life, which frankly has a lot of service in it than they were when they were working, right?
Yeah.
Being, whatever path they were on, whether they were teaching or in accounting or, what have you. But I just think that's kind of funny, right? So I think, all right, going to get me a good volunteer, and then right, and before I know, shoop, off they go.
They're too busy.
They're too busy.
Well, and the thought of having retirement just to rest, it gets boring pretty quick.
Right.
And so then you have to find things to keep you interested and engaged and social and all of that. And it's a rewirement is what I've heard said more often than retirement.
Right.
A couple of, I think they're Buddhist quotes came to mind. You said one in your talk, which is rather pointing at the moon and focusing on the finger rather than the moon. Like we lose our focus when we focus on the teacher or the teaching rather than the actual experience of it, stepping into it. The other thing that came to me is before enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water.
Right.
After enlightenment, chopping wood, carrying water.
Right.
That we still have work to do. But after enlightenment, or maybe during the process, we can see deeper into those things that we're doing and connected.
Well, and then, we also have, so I think I spoke to, let's see, we must expand our thinking of what God is, loosen the ball and chain of our old thinking, whether it's tied to a crystal or a cross or even a vortex or scientific principles, right? So all of these in a way become false gods, right?
Right.
So, because we make them responsible for our good, including our job, our spouse, our children, you know, all of these things that we make, I'll be happy if, right? But when we focus our attention and hitch our wagon to this idea of God, the all good, is available to me now in all ways, always, then the whole gig changes.
Yeah. And in Course in Miracles, they talk about the miracle being just a shift in perception. Yeah. And that is that shift, is refocusing on the true north.
Right. Well, that's where I came up with that. Actually, our pal Tatsuo Hirano was pushing me to do that. But the idea of shift and lift. Did you ever get one of those buttons?
I do. I have 2 buttons with 2 different colors.
So it's probably time to pull some of those out again. But but you know, it really is about, because if you try and it can be overwhelming, thinking that you've got to come up with the next big idea that's going to just make all this hardship, whatever it is, go away.
Right.
Really, all we're doing is shifting and lifting the tendency of our thought, right? One thought at a time.
That sounds like the way to do it. One step at a time.
Yeah. So because all you really need to do, let's say you're stuck in a cycle of negative thinking, right? So to tip it to the positive, you really only have to tip the negativity 51%. And so, that allows level the teeter-totter out. So let's say you're up here and so, like Shakespeare, I need the books. And then if you shift the tendency of your thinking, it levels out. And then you get to 54%, and it starts to tip. Right. So that's where that idea came from, that we want to work with the tendency of our thought, which to me, the way I take that is that Holmes understood that the human condition is that we will revert back to form. We'll revert back to what we're familiar with. Okay. That's basic psychology.
But there's also that if you do something enough, you create a new habit, a new way of being. And it takes practice to get there.
Right.
So that's where our spiritual practice
what is it Dispenza says? Neurons that fire together, wire together, something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway.
So I was looking for something else in the notes about what if God doesn't work against us, but works for us, even through us. And that idea that shift can be as simple as everything is not working against me. And then what if it's working for me? Not even fully stepping into, okay, everything's working for me, because that would be a hard flipping of the script to do all at once.
No, but it is a great affirmation. Things are working out for me. Things are always working out for me.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, that is a very strong affirmation.
Yeah. And it just, I don't know, sometimes with affirmations, if I make them too affirmative, there's a part of me that says, oh, I'm not sure I believe that. So, but then I get creative and look for ways that maybe things are working out for me in ways I can't see.
Right.
So I was trying to convince you with the going to court, maybe it could be a field trip and you take a nice trip on the train and then you go have lunch in the market. And, I was thinking of other
going
things.
Downtown.
Right. Trying to think of other things.
I love downtown.
But see, maybe you could look for a way that you can
Petula
discover.
Clark was speaking to London, by the way.
Okay, good to know.
When you're alone and life is making you jump, you can always go
downtown
to pay your ticket.
And then you could take a walking tour of the Victorian buildings in downtown. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I look for those creative ways that something good will come. Like
Right. To reframe.
I will go into the day going, okay, I don't know, but I'm going to look for something good. I'm going to look for something I don't expect, something that's a sign that the universe is supporting me, that the power of God is working through me. And maybe it's just, meeting a county clerk and seeing them be in a terrible mood and being nice to them and seeing them lighten up and know that might be good for somebody down the line who comes to see them that day. Or so
it could be. What else
when
is
we
in
find
there?
out your court date, we'll practice. Let's see what else is in there. So this is
what if it's not what if it's not part of some divine plan that we live in poverty, lack, or limitation of any kind, but rather that we have the keys to the kingdom. And in order to claim those keys, then we have to change the way that we see, right? We see the divine and the way that we relate to the divine as well.
Yeah.
So that we're not a serf.
Right.
Right. Approaching the spirit with our hat in hand.
Right.
But rather as sons and daughters of the Most High, making claim respectfully to our inheritance, right? And to know that unlike maybe our earthly parents who was, what did you talking about inheritance? That the spirit, because it's infinite in nature, is just saying, yes, my beloved, yes. It is done. And so this is where this concept of God working as law comes from, right? So that we're really wanting to step away from the idea that we are offending God in any way, including denying its existence at all, that there is no sin but a mistake, right? And that the nature of God the good is to create.
Whenever I hear people talk about sin or sin as a mistake, I think of, in Spanish, the word spelled the same way, sin is how it's pronounced, but sin, it means without. And so I think of it as, acting without, checking in first, operating from your highest self, operating from your most authentic self, being in integrity and alignment with your values. So it's just a mistake, and it happens, and it doesn't have to be intentional, and we don't have to beat ourselves up for it.
There's another thing that I think is kind of an interesting take on it. And this was from a Catholic priest who was teaching a class on baptism many years ago. And he spoke to sin being the idea that we are turning away from the light. So that's another way of looking at it. And in Buddhism, you might say that we're distracted.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but I think the main point for me, particularly for those of us who've grown up with Western ideas of spirituality, that to get away from a transactional idea that we have to give to get, to release that and instead to understand that we are inheritors. Is that the word?
I think it is.
Of a divine gift, of plenty, of abundance. And Holmes goes on to explore all of these things too. So he said, consider, the grains of sand in just within the palm of our hand, that we have evidence of abundance. You look up at the night sky,
Yeah.
So it's the nature of the divine. If all of it is an emanation from the mind of the spirit,
Mm-hmm.
intelligence, whatever you know it to be, then one of those characteristics is abundance. And so we want to step away from the idea that anything's being withheld or
Mm-hmm.
that there's not enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, we're taking away all of the excuses that we as finite human beings working with finite human minds defined only by the world as we know it to be up until now,
Mm-hmm.
and all of the ways that we can create chaos and challenge to keep us from living our best life now.
Mm-hmm.
So a psychologist could say, well, yeah, you're just talking about defeating the self-fulfilling prophecy. But I think it's more than that,
Mm-hmm.
because we, on some levels, we're just not even aware of how we get in our own way.
I'm thinking of a book I saw on the shelf in your office I think it's called The Anatomy of Spirit by Carolyn Mace.
Mm-hmm.
And she gives an example of imagine you have 100 cords of energy, and that's your allotted energy usage. And you can plug them in wherever you want to plug them in.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you realize that you're plugging them into things that aren't serving you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to unplug from those and call your power back, call your spirit back, maybe plug them just into yourself for a while, or find something that replenishes you and doesn't just drain you. And so it's a way to think about abundance, I think, too, that are you plugging all of your energy into something that isn't part of that cycle of giving and receiving? Not that it's a transactional thing, but when you're in the flow, it naturally unfolds that way.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So it's just a picture that came to me. It called me from over there.
Brilliant woman. Brilliant.
Carolyn Maces. So have we done a good job of the way it works? Do you want to look at your slides and see if we're missing anything? I mean,
well, just to understand that our belief is the only thing that sets the limit. Right. So
yeah.
I did have a couple quotes here.
Mm-hmm.
Our belief sets the limit. This is from Anatomy of Healing Prayer by Ernest Holmes.
A lot of anatomy today.
We demonstrate a principle which of itself is without limit. Spirit through law is ready to fill everything because it is infinite. So that it's not a degree of the Spirit's willingness, nor of its ability to do anything, but rather a question of our own receptivity. That it is the law of being for each of us, each one of us, that everything we do, that in everything we do, we shall prosper. That joy shall follow us, that everything we touch shall succeed, that goodness surrounds us, and we accept this law as the law of our being. That, my friends, is the way it works. Here in Granada Hills and everywhere else as well.
That's good.
And if you don't believe me, try it. So one of the things that we talked about is we're going to be engaging in a huge prayer / thought experiment based on the writings of Lynn McTaggart entitled The Power of Eight. So we got about 24 people signed up so far.
And that is divisible by 8, so that's handy.
So that's 3 groups, but we could easily have 10 groups. That's why I want to have like a 4-week recruiting session. And we're going to get into groups of 8, and we're going to do some prayer work. We're going to take a little survey to see how we feel about life, where we are in life, any challenges we may currently be experiencing. We'll take a survey of that. We'll stick that in an envelope and set it aside. And then we'll do our prayer work for about 10 weeks, I think.
Okay.
And then I got to kind of work it out. I probably jumped the gun a little bit because I was thinking,
You were so excited.
I know, but I was thinking that it would be kind of cool to do from like Ash Wednesday to Easter Sunday.
Okay.
Right. But we can get a jump on it.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that we're going to be locked into a prayer commitment in groups of 8. And then.
And so you've read her book. What is it that she's found? Or are we going to be reading the book as we go or something? I'm
well,
just
I
wondering
suppose
why
we could. I'm really making, it's not going to be a class per se, but there is a sacred covenant involved in that anyone who engages in the experiment is going to agree to take 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the evening to do prayer.
And are you supposed to focus on what you wrote down, or is it more universal?
Right. So I'm going to provide a format for people to use, or they can abandon. I mean, someone, if they wanted to use a serenity prayer or I mean, the Spirit doesn't care. Okay. Right. So it just, you bring to mind the person or people that you're raising in prayer, and then you pray. Okay. And and then we're going to measure. So we're going to see what it's like beforehand, see what it's like afterwards. Now, what she found was that the person being prayed for sometimes had a demonstration and sometimes did not.
Were the people informed that they were being prayed for?
That I don't know. That'll have to dig into the book more. However, what she did find was that the people who were doing the praying for that one person had significant changes themselves. So it was actually the activity of praying for someone else that was the healing power for the individual. So it's
the practice of connecting to the divine.
Right. And so we're going to, I think this will be a great way to start the new year. Yeah. And there's a lot of new names on there also. So we can get folks kind of folded into the gig and see where we go. And then, Sherry's going to be working this YouTube channel. So if you're still watching this, don't forget to subscribe. We should probably tell you that at the beginning. Yeah. And so we're going to consciously work towards that. And we, of course, appreciate Sherry's efforts on that behalf. And so when the live streaming is working on Sundays, you will be able to actually chat with Sherry in real time. Okay. Because she'll be joining us online, particularly if she knows that there's 20 or 30 of you sitting on there waiting to, ask her questions. And then she is a licensed practitioner who went through training here at the center. And in my first practitioner class, in fact. So she's been at it for a while. And so she'll be available to work with people also. That's great. She's also trained through Mary Morrissey, Drum Builder thing. And she's a strong coach in her own right. So very cool. It's all her idea. When she came up with it, I got very excited about it. So yeah, it's just another way to connect. Yeah. All the plugs of energy of CSLGH. Exactly. Yeah. The tentacles were like Spectre. Why'd you do that? Is Spectre a villain? Spiritual Spectre. Yeah, but that was from that's not it. Old James Bond. Oh, wait, no, that's right. New James Bond is now old James Bond. I was actually thinking of Casino Royale. Oh, okay. From the real James Bond, Sean Connery. Oh, okay. Yeah. I see. So just cancel all that. I mean, anything named Spectre sounds like a villain.
I wasn't thinking Bond. I think
You
I
were
was thinking of
Phil?
like, no, I was thinking, that's rock and roll, man. I was thinking of Spider-Man has a character with lots of,
Oh yeah, the dude with all the.
yeah. I don't know what his name is though.
Well, by
Probably not
next week,
Spectre.
I will come up. Oh, maybe just a system of roots intertwined together.
Oh, that's good.
The CSL system supporting
Yeah.
the tree of life,
Yes.
expressing itself.
Much better visual. Well, I
Maybe
think
we can hold this up together. How do I put my hand? There we go.
I don't know how to hold a tree
All
that's
right.
hanging behind me.
So there's some silliness. We better sign off.
I think
before
it's probably about time. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
She's
for
really
doing
good
it.
at this, don't you think?
Thanks. I enjoy it.
You can make your comments below here.
Oh, hopefully. If that's where it lines up. Yes. Make comments, send questions,
Give us a
request
thumbs up.
songs from Reverend Mike.
Roxanne. All right.
And we'll see you. I don't know if we'll see you next week. I think I'll be traveling next week.
Ooh, to
Yeah.
Scotland?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
So see you sometime
Bionic.
soon.
Peace, love, dove.
Toodaloo. Bye-bye. Oops, I said cancel.